What are you talking about? Competitive play against just a single player to claim dominance over the board? Sure, if you are a newcomer or just prefer the simpler life, you can engage in one-on-one combat. But once you're ready to engage in a proper challenge, step up to a game that consists of 4 players competing against each other. Now that is a challenge. Otherwise, what are you talking about, Willis? Greetings and welcome back to Checkpoint Gaming, Chess. With this episode, we will be going over Chaturaji. With Chaturaji, it is a 4-player game that has similarities to that of Chaturanga, chess, shogi, and other variants of chess, and can also be known as chupat. Although it was at one point considered to be the ancestor of Chaturanga, and thus the progenitor of all chess-related games, this 4-player variant is now considered to be a later development of the game. A part of the confusion can stem from the fact that some people know this 4-player version as Chaturanga, while others know it as Chaturaji. For purposes of this series, we'll be referring to it as Chaturaji. And since the writer of this series minored in history when he was in college, a part of him is interested in hearing the debate surrounding this matter. He's also a lawyer's son, so that has encouraged him to enjoy a good intellectual debate over a subject. With all of that said, Chaturaji is a very long-lived game with evidence of its existence found as far back as the 11th century CE, with it being described by the Iranian scholar and polymath Abu Rajhan Muhammad al-Biruni around 1030 CE. A reference to the game possibly exists within the Indian epic Mahabharata, which is one of the 2 major Sanskrit epics that are in existence. With the word Chaturaji, it means 4 rajas, or 4 kings. With each army that each player controls, they're color-coded with the original version, possessing a level of chance to it, as seen with the fact that the pieces that are to be moved are decided by the roll of the dice, thus giving the game an element of luck to it. But with that said, there are variants to the game that are played without dice. In addition to this, the objective of Chaturaji is to not put the king of the other players into check, but to engage in capturing and ransoming. This is done in order to score points with the player that accumulates the most points being deemed the winner. Although a variant to the game is to see the killing off of the opponent's pieces, will be approaching the game from the position of scoring points being the means of winning the game. When setting up the game, an 8x8 square board is used with some squares being marked, although this isn't mandatory since a regular chessboard is able to be used. Each player also gets 8 pieces that are of the same suit and consists of a ship, a horse, an elephant, a king, and 4 pawns. Some sources list the ship as being that of a boat, but for purposes of this series, we'll be referring to it as a ship. With the ownership of horses and ships, they can be determined by their orientation upon the board. When the pieces are placed upon the board, each player is to start off with the ship piece being placed into the board's corner square, found to the given player's left, and going from left to right, the back row of pieces is that of the ship, horse, elephant, and king. With the placement of the pawns, it is upon the player's second rank, thus found in front of their back rank. If playing the game in teams, the teammates will sit across from each other with their respective pieces found diagonally from each other. With the color set of the pieces, they consist of red, yellow, green, and black, and if playing as teams, red and yellow team up, while green and black team up. In addition to needing a board and pieces, a single dice will also be required. Although an oblong dice is traditionally used with each side bearing that of 2, 3, 4, and 5 upon it, a 6-sided die is able to be used with only a roll of 2, 3, 4, and 5 being recognized with a roll of 1 or 6, causing a re-roll to occur. With the roll of the die, it is to dictate the movement of the pieces upon the board. And when throwing the die, players are allowed to throw them in the air, followed by catching them with the hope of gaining some level of control over the outcome. Since humanity typically doesn't like the idea of not having some level of control over their life, it's understandable that this rule has been added to the game. If playing the game with the use of 2 dice, then the player is able to perform 2 movements upon the board, 1 for each die, and it is possible for a single piece to be moved twice, or 2 different pieces be moved once with the player choosing to skip one or both of their moves. With the die results, they look like this. If a 2 is rolled, then the ship is to be moved. If a 3 is rolled, then the horse is to be moved. If a 4 is rolled, then the elephant is to be moved. And if a 5 is rolled, then the king or pawn is to be moved. But if a tetrahedron die is used, then subtract 1 from each of these values with a 1 moving the boat, a 2 moving the horse, a 3 moving the elephant, and a 4 moving the king or pawn. And if a player doesn't have a legal move to make, then their turn is to be skipped, thus essentially causing them to lose a turn. In addition to this, if the player lost a piece that is indicated by the roll, it'll also cause the player to skip their turn. In order to determine who will be going first, each player is to roll a die with the player who rolled the highest value being player 1. But if 2 or more players roll an equal value when it comes to that of the highest value, then a roll-off is to occur to see who will be going first. From there, play is to move in a clockwise direction around the board. When it is the player's turn, they will move a single piece to another square upon the board which can possibly see the capturing of an opponent's piece. With the moving of the pieces, they consist of the following. With the ship, it is able to move 2 squares diagonally in any direction, and being able to jump over any intervening pieces as it does this, regardless of if they're friend or foe. With the horse, it is able to move 2 squares either vertically or horizontally, followed by moving 1 square over, thus creating a right angle in an L-shaped pattern. As it does this, it's able to jump over any intervening pieces. With the elephant, it is able to move vertically or horizontally any number of squares the player desires, although it is unable to jump over any intervening pieces in the process. With the king, it is able to move 1 square in any direction that the player desires. With the pawn, it is able to move 1 square forward to an unoccupied square unless it is going to engage in a capture, which it does so diagonally forward. With moving forward, it will vary between players based upon their position around the board. There is also no double move forward as their initial action. And if there's another piece found right in front of a pawn when it is the pawn's turn to move, then it'll be unable to move due to it being blocked. If the player manages to move one of their pawns to the last rank of the board and has lost a ship, horse, or elephant earlier in the game, then the pawn is to be promoted to one of the previously captured pieces. However, if the player is yet to have one of these pieces captured, then the pawn is to stay in the square of promotion, being unable to move until another player captures their ship, horse, or elephant. But once said piece has been captured, the pawn found in the square of promotion is to be immediately promoted, assuming that the immobile pawn hasn't been captured by another player before it had the chance to get promoted. A variant to this sees the pawn get promoted to the piece that was found behind it at the start of the game. So if a pawn was found in front of an elephant when it reaches the far side of the board, it'll have to be promoted to that of an elephant. But if this piece is yet to be captured, then it'll have to wait before it gets promoted. Some variants also allow the pawn to be promoted to a piece that is found along the square of promotion's file or rank, which includes the king. When it comes to that of capturing, it is done by moving a piece into a square that is occupied by an opponent's piece. And in some variants, if playing in teams, players are unable to capture the pieces of their teammate, while in other variants, players are allowed to capture allied pieces. When a horse, elephant, or king, through the course of their movement, lands upon a piece that belongs to that of another player, that piece becomes captured and is removed from the board. With that of a king, it is able to be captured just like that of any other piece. And unlike that of chess, players don't need to move their king out of check or to avoid putting it into such a position. With ships, they can capture pawns and ships, but will be unable to capture horses, elephants, or kings. With pawns, they'll be able to capture ships and other pawns, but will be unable to capture horses, elephants, or kings. In the situation where a player's ship comes to rest besides the other 3 boats, then all of the other ships will become captured and removed from play. This is known as the triumph of the ship triumph, or boat parade, and can be seen with all of the ships meeting within a 2x2 square area of the board. So when the player who has moved last forms a full ship triumph, they will capture all of the other players' ships. And it is only in this given situation where a ship is capable of capturing another ship. If playing in teams and a player lands their king within the starting square of their allied king, then said player is said to have gained the throne. When this has been accomplished, they'll take control of their ally's army, which allows the player to move either their or their allied pieces when they perform the movement roll. But if the player's king lands on the starting square of an opposing player, they'll be unable to take their throne, thus allowing the opponent to continue moving normally. When it comes to that of team play, if one player from each team captures the king of the enemy, then the capturing players can agree to perform an exchange of kings, where the captured kings are returned to their owners and then placed onto their starting square if possible. But if they're not able to place their king upon its starting square, then they're to put it as near to the starting square as possible. And if a player manages to capture both enemy kings in team play, then said player can demand the release of the king of their ally. If the opposing players agree to this, then the ally king is to be placed upon the board as described earlier. In the situation where a player only has a ship and a pawn left upon the board, then the pawn is considered to be privileged, which allows the pawn, once it reaches any square found upon the board's edge, to become any piece of the player's choice once reaching the square of promotion. In addition to this, if one team is the only team to have forces found left upon the board, then they have won the game. And if only kings are left upon the board, then it is said that all players have fought honorably, thus reaching an honorable peace, and the game ends in a draw. As addressed in the previous episode, the objective of the game is to score the most amount of points, not to defeat the king. And if one looks throughout human history, just because a king has been captured, killed, or defeated doesn't mean their side has lost the battle. So with the earning of points, it is done through the capturing of the opponent's pieces. With the capturing of a pawn, it is worth 1 point. With the capturing of a ship, it is worth 2 points. With the capturing of a horse, it is worth 3 points. With the capturing of an elephant, it is worth 4 points. And with the capturing of a king, it is worth 5 points. In some variants of the game, if a player manages to capture all 3 of the opposing kings while their king is still found upon the board, they're to score 54 points. This value is the sum of points that is equal to all of the pieces found in the opposing 3 armies. So with that said, that is what you need to know about Chaturaji. With that taken care of, we can start talking about variants of Chaturaji. If you liked this episode, feel free to give it a like, and if you want to stay up to date on any future episodes we upload, go ahead and subscribe. You can also support us on Patreon for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/checkpointgaming. See you in the next episode, and happy gaming.